right, so today for our ethical dilemma, we introduce a hot and contentious topic from within the robotics and artificial intelligence community, the topic of robot rights. The problem goes as follows. At what point should we grant robots rights of their own? Naturally, this problem follows along the same lines as many human rights problems, of course, given the caveat that we are not discussing the rights of humans, but rather of robots. However, what actually distinguishes humans from robots? What gives humans the right to have rights and denies robots the rights to anything? You might ask yourself, isn't it the fact that robots are not humans? Well, in the United States at least, corporations like Facebook and Google are granted legal rights of their own, and they aren't humans. So what else is standing in the way of robot rights? Is it consciousness? If the only thing standing in the way of robots being granted rights is their lack of consciousness, then there are so many questions that we have yet to answer. First, let's just make the assumption that robots have the capability of being conscious and that there's no way for us to prove whether or not this has happened. Also, as a disclaimer and side note, if you're curious about the ethical conundrums of robot consciousness and why it's so difficult for us to know if a robot or AI is conscious, check out our episode on iRobot, which is probably somewhere around here. In this discussion today, we're going to shift the focus away from the debate on robot consciousness and instead focus on a more pragmatic way forward. So first, given that we may never know if a robot is fully conscious, how and when should we know to grant them rights? Second, if we do grant robots rights, well, what rights do we grant them? And finally, if we don't grant robots rights, where is the line between having no rights and implementing a form of robot slavery? Some scholars have fought against these ideas, like Abeba Burhani, who authored the paper Robot Rights? Let's Talk About Human Welfare Instead. In this paper, Abeba and her collaborators argue that the debate on robot rights is dangerously distracting us from the more pressing issues related to AI and human welfare. So if you're curious about this argument, we highly recommend you go check out the paper, which is linked in our description below. For today, though, we are going to dive into the depths of this problem. And Ex Machina is a great example for us to use to frame the discussion on robot rights because of the way that the movie's antagonist, Nathan Bateman, chooses to treat his AI robots. Throughout the movie, Nathan is arguably incredibly abusive towards his robots. This includes verbal abuse, emotional abuse, and sexual abuse. In fact, the abuse of Ava and the other robots in the film is where we are going to start our discussion today. So let's kick it off with the first question. When it comes to potentially sentient AI, where do we draw the line between use and abuse?